everyone, welcome to the Creator Studio, Charles Reeves.
Chuck.
Oh, Chuck Reeves. You go by Chuck or Charles?
Actually, my full name is Charles Henry Reeves IV.
Oh,
So
wow.
when I'm home,
Yeah.
my immediate family calls me Chucky, and then everyone else calls me Chuck because my dad goes by Chuck.
Oh,
So,
okay. So
Chuck
really moving forward.
Any variation of Charles I will answer to.
Okay. You are a senior developer advocate at Vonage.
Correct, yes.
And you are also a polyglot programmer with a background in DevOps, system architecture, and building everything from space tech command systems to creative hackathon projects. My first question is a career transition question. You've had a fascinating career, moving from DevOps and system architecture into developer advocacy at Vonage. What motivated that shift?
So when I first got into DevOps, I always tell the people I started off in the IT world, and then I hated getting phone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I then became a developer. And when I did that transition, I was actually very surprised at how many developers could not set up a web server, even though they're web developers. So I would start building out tools for them to control those servers. So I was doing DevOps before. I know it sounds very hipstery. DevOps before it became a vernacular inside of it. But that has always been my approach to DevOps, is that I'm building tools that will empower developers to do their job easier and also make it easier to deploy and get them to go to market as quickly as possible. And when it comes to DevRel, it's actually a very similar type of work where I'm building out tools that help our customers use our products. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to find out what their needs are, what the pain points are for using our SDKs or APIs, or tools, and then we try to make it easier for them to work on it. So one example I always give is we used to have an API where in order to upload a photo for your brand image, you would have to follow a 3-step process where you get assigned URL, upload it to the URL, and then link the two together. So what we did with our SDKs is we decided just to say, you know what, take where you want to link it to, your profile ID, and the file you want to upload, and then we did those 3 steps in the SDK instead of everyone else having to go through and do it. And that's what DevRel really is. It's about making things easier for product adoption.
Fantastic. As customer zero at Vonage, you test features before anyone else. How do you make sure your feedback to engineering translates into a better developer experience?
Right. So we have a whole process at Vonage where we have many different gates that come into play. What we do is with those different phases in the DevRel community is we inject ourselves and we meet with the teams ahead of time. So basically there's a design phase where we meet with the engineers and we go over our API standards that we have to enforce them to follow. We ask them about the product, how they're thinking it's going to work, and then we come up with the best ways to design the API from that step. Once it goes into development and it goes into like an alpha or beta phase, that's when we'll start coming in and communicating with the actual APIs that they develop to make sure that it's reaching the spec, it's doing what has to be done, and then we'll coordinate back with the project managers to address any issues or bugs that come up. Then after it's released, that's when we'll do a full release where we put out we make sure our documentation is accurate and correct. Now we actually have an MCP server, so we'll update our MCP server on our side. That's our responsibility. We'll do any blogs, how-tos, tutorials, demos, all around using those features. So the way we structure it as our DevRel team is we have 4 different groups, which is the relations engineers, which is what I am. We have a documentation team, we have a community team, and then we have the content team. Documentation and content are different. Content is our blogs, our sponsorships, our community, our coming here to DevFest, all of that. And what we do is we arrange everyone into different groups. We call them pods. And each one of us each pod takes up a different product that we offer. So I'm part of the messaging pod where I deal with the MMS, RCS, which is Google standard, and we actually support RCS now, so a little plug in there. And I'll coordinate with the engineering team more, where I'm able to talk to the engineers and then the documentation team to make sure that we're presenting accurate information.
You've built everything from a scam caller blocker with AI to Raspberry Pi Baby Monitor. Which project do you feel best shows how creativity can solve real developer problems?
Sure. So one of them on this list is a trivia game I built for We Are Devs about 2 years ago. And it's basically a clone of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And the trick is that I use ChatGPT to create the questions and answers, which I have a list of some funny questions and answers that it gave. Like one example was, what year was Taylor Swift born? And it said 1989. I'm like, no, that's not right. That's the title of her album. So, we get those little hallucinations that come in. And the gimmick with that was, because if you're familiar with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, there's these lifelines. And two of the lifelines are Ask the Audience and Phone a Friend. So because we were doing this at We Are Developers, I had Dial a Friend, which used our voice API through the browser to call someone who registered that's in the audience so we can ask them the question. And then for Ask the Audience, it was Text the Audience. So the audience would text in their answers, and then you would see it update coming inside right there. And there was a lot of cases where I had to do some polling. I had to make sure that I had multiple regions, multiple phone numbers added in. So there was really a lot of orchestration that had to come into play with that.
Okay. And I want to ask you about the challenges at work. What's been the most technically challenging SDK or CLI feature you've worked on, and how do you overcome the hurdles?
So very recently with our CLI, I added 2 new features. One was interactive mode. So this way it will come through and walk you through setting up an application and get you bootstrapped with our products. The challenges I found there, it was actually pretty easy to do because I've worked with standard in and standard out before. But something that I've been trying to advocate for this year is improving accessibility in command line tools. So trying to figure out what makes a CLI tool accessible for anyone out there, blind users, deaf users, users with limited mobility. And the challenge I found with that was I couldn't find a lot of developers who still use CLI tools that have these type of disabilities that come into play. So it was trying to aggregate information I had, and I actually found a white paper that was done by Google where they worked with a bunch of different blind developers, and they used you guys used the NASA task list index, which I'm familiar with my aerospace background. And I said, oh, there we go. And from those results, I found, okay, make sure we have tables formatted a different way, try not to over ask information, try to make things presentable. And I was able to take that and transform it into our CLI and hopefully make it easier for people with disabilities to use a lot better.
Fantastic.
So that was one of the most challenging things I had to work on.
Okay. Wow, great. And lastly, another question or advice for developers is for developers who want to move into advocacy or community leadership, what advice would you give based on your own journey?
Sure. I would say the best thing to do is attend local meetups and user groups and try presenting there. Because once you get a knack for public speaking, it becomes a lot easier. It also helps you figure out like what works and what doesn't work. So they're always like the dress rehearsals for the bigger conferences. So here for DevFest, I actually gave this talk a number of times at some local startups, local meetups and local user groups, and I would get the feedback right there saying, "Oh, try this instead," so that really you can hone in those skills. And then another piece of advice I would give is contribute to open source. Find something on GitHub, look at an issue, try to fix it, because now you're going to get the feedback from somebody else that says, oh, I don't want to use it this way. And then you sort of get an idea and a feel for how users and developers are actually using different applications, different tools out there, so you get that knowledge base coming in. So one other thing I do at Vonage is I do internal DevRel. So I'll actually talk to our engineers, our CSAs, our customer support architects, all these different support teams, and talk to them about our products, because I use the whole dodgeball quote: if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. So if I can internally advocate, I can externally advocate as well too. So it just takes practice and confidence, and eventually you'll get to it.
And can you also tell us one exciting thing about your job that you would like to share?
Sure. I love traveling all over the place and talking to people. That's one of the fun things. Come up meeting interesting people, finding out what they're working on. It gives me a lot of inspiration for stuff I like to be doing.
Thank you so much for being here at the Creator Studio. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.